Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you about how a US court has ruled that America's reciprocal tariffs are illegal. We'll also take a look at how Trump distorts the rule of law. In addition, we really have to thank Comrade Trump. The US plans to ban the sale of chip design software to China, and as a result, Chinese chip stocks have soared. Trump's arbitrary imposition of tariffs has turned into a legal battle in the United States. The American nonprofit organization, the Center for Freedom and Justice, filed a lawsuit on behalf of 5 small US businesses affected by the tariffs, challenging Trump's reciprocal tariff policy. As a result, on May 28, the US Court of International Trade ruled that Trump had overstepped his authority when he announced the reciprocal tariff policy on April 2 and blocked the US government from imposing blanket tariffs on countries with which the US has a trade deficit. The International Trade Court, located in Manhattan, New York, stated that the US Constitution grants Congress the exclusive authority to regulate trade between the United States and other countries, and that the emergency powers claimed by the president to protect the US economy do not override these congressional powers. The 3 judges of the International Trade Court, appointed respectively by Reagan, Obama, and Trump himself, unanimously ruled that the president had abused his emergency powers and crossed the constitutional red line. If Trump loses his appeal, the trade war he initiated will abruptly come to a halt within 10 days. Following the court's decision, the White House responded swiftly and forcefully, stating that it would appeal and would use every lever of executive power to fight back. This is a ruling made by unelected judges. The US International Trade Court's decision delivered 4 important conclusions. First, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act does not grant the president unlimited authority. Trump invoked the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act to unilaterally impose reciprocal tariffs on multiple countries under the pretext of an emergency. But the International Trade Court held that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act does not grant the president unlimited tariff authority. Trump does not have the power to impose tariffs on any country in any amount for an unlimited period of time. If the law were to grant the president broader powers, it would violate the principle of separation of powers in the US Constitution. Second, there are strict limitations on imposing tariffs to address trade deficits. Trump imposed tariffs on the grounds of addressing the trade deficit, but the International Trade Court stated that Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 clearly stipulates that tariffs imposed to address trade deficits can be no higher than 15% and cannot last longer than 150 days. The current reciprocal tariffs far exceed the limits set by the Trade Act. Third, tariffs cannot be used to address special threats. The International Trade Court also rejected Trump's claim that tariffs could curb the influx of illegal drugs, such as fentanyl, into the United States, stating that tariffs do not directly prevent any drugs from entering the country. This is merely a diplomatic strategy to put pressure on other countries, and it does not meet the requirements of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act for the president to use special powers in response to emergencies. Third, a nationwide permanent injunction. The US Constitution requires that tariffs and taxes must be uniform throughout the United States. Therefore, the International Trade Court will permanently prohibit the implementation of these reciprocal tariffs nationwide. In addition, the International Trade Court stated that it will issue the necessary administrative orders within 10 working days to enforce the permanent injunction against the reciprocal tariffs. At that time, if no higher court intervenes, the reciprocal tariff policy will become invalid. Since this lawsuit only targets the reciprocal tariffs announced on April 2, if they do become invalid, it means that out of the current 30% tariffs, the US has imposed on Chinese products, 10% will have to be withdrawn because the other 20% took effect before April 2. In addition, this ruling does not affect the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration under other legal authorities, including tariffs on steel, aluminum, and automobiles, as well as Trump's threats to impose tariffs on pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and other critical products. Unlike ordinary people, when Trump hears a court order, he doesn't think about how to comply with the law, but rather considers all sorts of ways to defy it. The first move will inevitably be to appeal. After the ruling was announced, the Trump administration immediately submitted an appeal plan to the higher court of the US Court of International Trade, namely the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. If the US Federal Circuit Court of Appeals still upholds the Trump administration's defeat, they can ultimately appeal to the Supreme Court. In addition, even if Trump loses the appeal, he will do everything possible to bypass the courts and issue an executive order to implement reciprocal tariffs. According to May Fay, a trade lawyer at Sender Law Firm, besides appealing, the Trump administration may seek an emergency stay of the International Trade Court's ruling and issue executive orders under other laws to initiate alternative tariffs. To sum up, first, the Trump administration abused presidential emergency powers under the pretext of issues like fentanyl, bypassing Congress to impose extremely high and long-term tariffs. This was already an abuse of power that disregarded the law. Second, Trump will not easily comply with the court's orders. He will provide a perfect demonstration of how the United States can use every possible means to completely distort the rule of law. If other countries acted the way he does, the United States would intervene, accuse them of not upholding the rule of law, or even impose sanctions. But when it comes to itself, the US acts however it pleases. It turns out that in a democratic country, to stop a lawless leader, it is actually more difficult for a president who breaks the law than to ascend to heaven. Third, after the ruling by the US Court of International Trade, global trade policy will become even more uncertain, and other countries will be even less likely to compromise easily with the United States. If a country signs a long-term agreement and accepts additional US tariffs, but in the end, the reciprocal tariffs are ruled invalid by the US Supreme Court, wouldn't that be extremely embarrassing for them? On this note, I want to talk about how the US is once again making moves targeting China's chip industry. As China continues to achieve major breakthroughs in the field of advanced chips, Trump has now set his sights on chip design software, hoping to use this as a means to suppress China's chip industry. According to a Financial Times report on May 28, the US government has already taken steps to restrict the sale of such products to China. Bloomberg also cited sources saying that on May 23, the US Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security sent letters to some American electronic design automation, EDA companies, requesting that they suspend shipments to Chinese customers. According to the Financial Times, Synopsys, Cadence, and Siemens EDA are all giants in this industry, and they will also be affected. After the related reports were published, Cadence's stock price plummeted by 10.7% that day, marking its largest single-day drop since March 2020. Meanwhile, Synopsys' stock price also fell by 9.6%. Bloomberg reported that the latest US government restrictions could mean a ban on these companies conducting business in China. Currently, 16% of Synopsys' revenue comes from China. About 12% of Cadence's revenue also comes from its business in China, and it is believed that this will be completely halted in the future. Last month, the Financial Times reported that the Trump administration was planning to put some Chinese chip manufacturers on a blacklist, making it extremely difficult for American companies to provide them with technology. However, the report said that some US officials were concerned that such actions would affect the ongoing trade negotiations between China and the United States at the time, so the decision was postponed. Christopher, a former China affairs analyst at the CIA, Jensen believes that China successfully used rare earths to bring the United States back to the negotiating table in the Indo-Pacific region, which has made the China hawks in the Trump administration eager to prove that their export control measures are still effective. Electronic design automation refers to the use of computer-aided design software to complete processes such as functional design, synthesis, verification, and physical design of very large-scale integrated electronic chips. It is known as the mother of chips. According to the Financial Times, although electronic design automation software accounts for a relatively small share of the entire semiconductor industry, it enables chip designers and manufacturers to develop and test the next generation of chips, making it a critical part of the supply chain. When Trump first became president, he banned Huawei from using American electronic design automation software in order to curb Huawei's development of advanced chips. After the Biden administration took office, the United States has gone to every length to suppress China's ambitions to develop advanced chips. However, despite these efforts, many industry insiders, including NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, believe that the US restrictions on chips for China have failed. Jensen Huang said that these actions have caused far more harm to American companies than to China, and NVIDIA has already lost $15 billion as a result. Trioc, a partner at DJ Group, said that while US export control measures are severing the ties between leading American companies in China's vast market, they are also creating competitors for themselves. He said that these control measures have motivated China to achieve self-sufficiency in its supply chain. Wang Peng, a researcher at the Beijing Academy of Social Sciences, also said that AI can optimize the chip design process through machine learning algorithms, improving both design efficiency and accuracy. For example, AI algorithms can be applied to simulation verification and layout routing in electronic design automation tools, accelerating the design process and reducing error rates. According to reports, many Chinese electronic design automation companies are stepping up their efforts, using AI technology to seize these business opportunities. News that the United States intends to cut off American companies from selling semiconductor design software to China has triggered a sharp rise in Chinese chip-related stocks. On May 29, Huahong Semiconductor, which is listed in Hong Kong, rose by 6%. Xiangxi Securities stated that there is enormous potential for domestic substitution in the mainland chip industry. Considering the possibility that the US may further tighten its chip export control policies, domestic customers will be compelled to accelerate the adoption of domestically produced AI chips and software services. At the same time, the rapid improvement in the performance of domestic chips is perfectly timed to meet this wave of demand for localization. On May 29, Ministry of Commerce spokesperson He Yunxi once again criticized the United States, stating that China has repeatedly engaged with the US regarding its various actions, such as the abuse of export control measures in the semiconductor sector. China once again urges the US to immediately correct its wrongful actions, stop imposing discriminatory restrictions against China, and work together to uphold the consensus reached at the high-level China-US talks in Geneva. To sum it up, first, we really have to thank Comrade Chuan Jianguo. With his latest push, the domestic wave of localization in chip design and software industries is about to surge. The United States is actually trying to force China to achieve technological breakthroughs. When the US banned Huawei from using American software design companies' services, It didn't bring Huawei down. Huawei still managed to produce advanced chips. Second, the stock market performance says it all. This news caused the share prices of American electronic design automation companies to plummet, while Chinese chip-related stocks soared. This shows that the US is voluntarily giving up the Chinese market, and in the future, this will foster a group of strong competitors to American companies. In 5 to 10 years, these competitors could end up defeating the American companies.